Hi reading group, hope you guys are doing well. Before talking a little bit more about vocabulary and the work that we're going to be doing for this week, just to put into context with where we started and then where we are now with the course. So as you know, first we talked about 21st century literacy demands and what it means to be literate today, and what that requires in general, and then also for each of your content areas. After that, we talked about comprehension, text complexity, barriers to comprehension, and then strategies for helping students to engage with the text that we want them to read. Beyond that, we thought about the unique needs of different kinds of learners. So thinking about students who maybe read at a different or a lower reading level, thinking about students' personalities and learning differences and learning styles, thinking about students who are less motivated to engage with the material that we want them to, and then last week, specifically focusing on the needs of our ESL students. So you will notice for the next few weeks, we'll be going over vocabulary, discourse, and writing. And for each of these are kind of our core components for English language arts. So items that are required for literacy. So we need to be able to understand and use words well, communicate with words and language, and then also thinking about writing in our classes and how we can use that to help our students become literate individuals. So getting into vocabulary specifically, vocabulary is probably a topic that you are at least somewhat familiar with, right? You guys have had experiences in your past with vocabulary and learning new words, and hopefully you had some good experiences with that. But one of the things that I really like about the way that the authors for the text of this week talk about vocabulary is in a more nuanced way. So what I mean by that is that for some of you, your best past practices may have been something like a teacher assigning a lot of vocabulary words and then giving you a week or so and then giving you a quiz over those words, which you maybe remembered those words long enough to do well on the quizzes, but those are words that you probably did not continue to use or engage with in the future and may or may not even remember well into the future. And so in the two textbook chapters, in addition to just providing strategies for vocabulary, which they do provide, you guys are going to get a chance to practice with some of those for this week as you create your own plan. But I like that they spend time, especially in the Beers book, talking just about what do we know about how one comes to know and understand, and beyond that, use words in their own vocabulary. So they talk about what we know about how to best teach new words and what those practices are that we could be doing consistently in our classroom. They also think about kind of the spectrum of how we come to know words, right? So a lot of times we think of this in a very black and white way, right? Like we know a word or we don't know a word. Our students know a word or they don't know a word. But we know that acquiring new vocabulary is more complicated than that. So they talk about kind of the levels of knowing a word. So I've seen a word, but I don't know what it means, or I've never seen or I've never heard this word. I understand it if someone else uses it, but I am not able to use this word in my own vocabulary, or I know and I use this word, right? So thinking about words in terms of a spectrum, right? Of not just I know this word or I do not know this word. And so, they do a good job of thinking about how we come to know words, and then what our practices, what are some of those best practices we can do as teachers to help our students to really know and understand new words, such as teaching roots, prefixes, and suffixes, because they can help our students to make meaning out of new words that they've never seen before. I'm not a big advocate of students just memorizing words and taking quizzes over words, but when it comes to roots, prefixes, and suffixes, this is something that is a great practice. It's something I did when I was a high school English teacher, so that our students know 150 roots, prefixes, and suffixes when they graduated. Things such as repeated, authentic exposure to new words. So not just giving students a list of words, but having them talk with their classmates about them, having them learn more about them, having them think about the connotative meaning of a word in addition to the denotative meaning of a word. So having them really engage with the word and use the words for the unit, in addition to just knowing a word long enough to do well on an assessment. Speaking of assessment, they do a good job as well in both of the books in thinking through how we can best determine if a student really understands words and concepts. So again, not something as simple as just being able to do a true-false, multiple choice, kind of matching of words and definitions, but that they can use them in real and meaningful and authentic ways. So they provide some great strategies for doing that. So like I often do, in addition to the course reading, there are some great resources for you here, and these are sample lessons. They're from Read, Write, Think, which is just an excellent resource for all different kinds of lessons, and they have the standards and then the steps for implementing a lesson. So here's some examples for how you might go about using some of the strategies that are in the textbook. So you will want to review at least 2 of those. For those of you who are taking the class online, as you know, you are going to be participating in the weekly discussion, which those are always initially due Thursday night and then responses by Sunday night. And then lastly, you will be applying the ideas in an assignment. So for the assignment for this week, you are going to be coming up with a plan for how you would teach a set of terms. And in terms of finding a set of terms to use, you can just really quickly, easily use like a Quizlet or just Google and find a set of terms around a specific content or topic, that you would be teaching in your content area. So you could do a search, come up with a list of maybe 5 to 10 vocabulary words, and then you are going to describe how you're going to go about introducing these words to your classes, how you are going to reinforce an understanding of these words, and then how you will assess this set of terms. So again, kind of thinking about that larger plan of not how we're just going to give kids a set of words and then do some arbitrary and authentic assessment, right? Like multiple choice or matching or something like that. But instead, how are you going to initially introduce these terms to the students in a meaningful way? This may be something like an anticipation guide or a checklist where they're going through and determining the extent to which they know and understand a word. How are you going to introduce them? How are you going to reinforce them? So what are those different practices or activities or strategies that you're going to be using throughout the week in order to help students, or a couple of weeks, depending on how long the unit is, that you're going to be reinforcing students' understanding of the words. And then lastly, how you're going to go about assessing the set of words. After that, then you are going to be creating one of these items. So one of the things that you're going to be using. So this may be you're creating the final assessment that you're going to be using. It may be creating what you're going to use to introduce the words to the students, or one of those strategies that you're going to be using throughout the week to reinforce the understanding of the knowledge. So there's all different kinds of strategies in your text, like possible sentences, like concept circles, pairing vocabulary words, a portable word wall. So all different kinds of strategies that are listed. I also have listed quite a few of those right here for you as well, that are ones that you may want to choose. But you're coming up with a plan for how you're going to introduce, reinforce, and assess. And then you are going to be creating one of those that you would actually use. You're creating something you're going to use with your students. So you can use one of these different strategies if you would like. So that's it for this week. As always, reach out if you do have any questions or anything as you are working, and I look forward to seeing what you come up with.